Hi, thank you so much everyone for joining today. I'm Shyamala, I'm a software engineer at Volkswagen Digital Lab, and today I would like to talk about the art of crafting sustainable products. Let's first start with the definition of what sustainable mean. Sustainable means, by the dictionary definition, ability to maintain something at certain rate or level. So this is very important because a product outlives you or me, right? So what makes a product maintainable? So traditionally, we would say something like test-driven development, having like a CI/CD. But I would say that these are the 5 important principles that makes a product sustainable: communication, simplicity, feedback, respect, and courage. So these are 5 extreme programming principles that help us build sustainable products. So what is extreme programming, right? So it's one of the agile methodology that kind of like helps you to write software or build products that you can adapt to the changing needs of the client or the user. So who helps to follow these principles, right? So there are 3 important roles. So the first, I'm not sure like if you have heard about the Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. So I kind of like got this idea inspired from that. So according to this talk, and I definitely recommend it. So he says that the best market leaders are the people who knows about the whys of why the product exists, and then the circle is kind of like growing from there. So there is a why, there is the how, and there is the what. Most people know about the what, and so on. So this kind of principle that you can apply to anything that you come across. So I tried to put these things into the 3 roles. So the user experience designer or the product designer, the product manager, and the software engineer. So these are the 3 important roles that I think is really essential for having a sustainable, and the ability to develop a sustainable product. So the user experience designer or the product designer, so they always start with the question why. So why this problem needs to be solved? Is there even a pain point for the user? So they are asking the questions, and the product manager is focusing on what needs to be developed, like prioritizing which problems needs to be solved when, and then the software engineer takes care like how this can be presented to the user as a wholesome product. So does this mean that these 3 roles are operating in silos, that they care about only what they care about? Definitely not. So that's why we have balanced teams where all of the 3 roles comes together and works together. So they have shared knowledge, collective ownership, and transparent communication. So what drives this balanced team is the user and the business value. So it's very, very important that all of these roles understand the problem domain and they work together well. And so now that we have clarified what are the roles, now what helps these roles to follow these principles? One of the most important thing that I want to say here is that principles are constant. They don't change when the circumstances change, but practices change based on the circumstances. So I'm going to outline certain practices that I have found that are very important for having a sustainable product development, but these are always not true based on the circumstances. So how your company is structured, how you are working, so all of these things are also responsible for what kind of practices that you follow. But it's very, very important that we always respect that each practices that we follow somehow kind of like focuses on the principles. So normally our week starts with iterative planning meetings. Following slides, I have structured it in a way to say which principles these practices are like, adhering to, and some tools and techniques that I have used or our team uses in the digital lab. But you can, use whatever that, you feel that it's kind of fulfilling the purpose. So the iterative planning meetings are basically a small meeting like that takes place for about half an hour to 1 hour in the beginning of the week. So normally you are prioritizing your tasks for the week. So that's how agile that you can be. And in this meeting, it's not only just the product manager and the engineer, the whole team is like, sitting together. It's not just few, it's basically the whole team is sitting together and discussing what is the priority for the coming week. Here we are always concentrating on outcomes, not the output. So output, you could say something like, okay, how many user stories have I delivered or something like that. So, but this is not what we care about. The things that we care about is what user value. So every story that you have delivered or you're going to deliver actually gives the user the value and also the business the value. So what is the impact that you have generated by prioritizing it in this way, right? So it's more based on outcomes and not outputs. So so this is one of the important meetings that we start the whole week with. So everybody is on the same page. And the next thing that I want to talk about is design reviews. So design reviews are typically hosted by product designers. So product designers, as I mentioned before, they are the ones who are asking the question, why? Why do we need to develop this product, or why do we need to develop this feature? What is the impact? So if you are going to solve this pain point and we have designed something, it's very important that the whole team sits together and understands the problem domain. So I'm a great believer that like engineers tend to kind of like distance themselves from discussions on products. So sometimes I have come across like, okay, give me a story, I would like, give me a screen, I would just make it like, work for you. Give me a pretty screen and I will. So this is not how it works, because everything that is there on the screen, it's very important because they provide value to the user. So having tabs or having clicks, every action counts something for the user, and the developer and the designer and the product manager needs to come together to understand why we have designed something. So design reviews are extremely helpful in that sense. And also, like, I'm a firm believer that the design is also directly responsible for writing maintainable code. Sometimes if the design is complex, it could also drive the code to be complex and in turn like push the code to the edge, and vice versa, right? So it's very, very important that the designers and the engineers, most importantly, come together to have a better maintainable product. Yeah, so this is actually the idea of design reviews, where basically the designers and the team which worked on the user research are presenting the research, the synthesis, and the design that they have come up with. Typically, we also have design sprints, which is kind of like a week-long exercise to have like some of the major features developed, in which sense also that we have every representation in this team that's working on the design sprint, which is very, very important. And the next thing that I want to talk about is pair programming. So pair programming is basically two engineers sit together and they work on either the same code base or algorithm or whatever that, like, they have to work on. So the typical setup looks like this. So you have like two monitors, and then you have your keyboards, and you have your separate mouses. So both of you can control the code. There are different techniques, like one of the things with pair programming is that now that you have the control over the same code base, you should be like aware of like you're not typing over each other or something like that. And there are different techniques which would basically help you to avoid these kind of things. But basically, why pair programming, right? Like I can just work alone. So pair programming is kind of like so there are a lot of advantages for pair programming. So one of the main advantage is that you can avoid like the buzz factor. So which is basically like if you win a lottery today and then you're basically like going to leave because you're a millionaire now, so you don't want to work anymore, then you're not the only one having loads and loads of information in your head, and that you have to give like the knowledge transfer within like a day or two, or like or if you don't give, it's basically like a knowledge silo has left the team. It's not the only advantage of why you pair program. It's also like you don't have a separate step of code reviews, because it's like two people are working on the same code base, which means it is reviewed then and there, because normally there is a concept of like one person who is being the navigator, the other one is the driver. So the navigator foresees like how the code should go, and how what needs to be done to make this feature, and the driver is the one who is actually listening to the ideas and executing it, and then you are switching these roles often as well. So this way the knowledge is also transferred, and within a team, let's say if you are 6 developers, you're also rotating among the pairs. So one of the big how can I say, one of the big advantage of basically having to pair program is that no single person owns the code. It's the team that owns the code. So it automatically comes up that if something is like, if there is a bug, there is no one trying to do git blame and say, rather than it's like, okay, it's my team, it's our code, and we have to fix the bug. So the team takes responsibility. So pair programming is also giving like higher team morale, and also it's a great way to onboard somebody who is coming new to the team. And also like if you are a backend engineer who is new to front end, then you can pair. And this is also I would like to say, like you have your personal Google sitting next to you, and that you can ask your questions, and they already are experienced in that topic. So as I said, this it's not only for pair programming. Like when you have a designer and you can also like pair with your product manager, your designer from time to time. Also like the cross role pairings is also kind of like the best, because you kind of like get even more insights to what you are building. And also pair programming is a practice. It might not work for everybody. So you can try to see like where it makes sense to do pair programming and where it makes sense to do solo. But either way, this is a great way to have a higher team morale, and also increases knowledge sharing, and it's a best way to have like consistent code base as well. The next thing that I want to talk about is a practice called TestDriven Development. This is basically like just for instead of writing your implementation, you start with the test. So the test is basically testing the behavior, what you want out of this piece of code that you want to write. So there are a lot of how it works is basically a red green refactor cycle. So the red means you first write the behavior and make it fail, and then you write whatever that is necessary to make that test pass. So if you want to have a better implementation, then you have to write better tests. So you make your tests drive the implementation. So this way you can basically avoid most obvious bugs. So I'm not saying that if you do TDD, it's a bug-free software. There is no such thing like that. But you can avoid obvious bugs. At the same time, if someone accidentally does change to the code, then it also makes it easier for the refactor. So if you change something in the code, your test gives you the feedback if the code is working exactly like how it was meant to work. So this is very important, and we are always like, the best way to have a great software or a great product is to have test driven development, or like even writing tests, because this is basically giving you a lot of feedback on the behavior of the product, and how you want to change it, and if you change it, what are the repercussions of this. So I'm a big fan of test driven development, but I wouldn't say like, okay, TDD is kind of like the only best practice, but you should always, even if you are writing tests after the fact, it's very important to write tests nevertheless. So there are different levels of testing. There is unit testing, there is outside in, you have this integration testing with consumer driven contracts, and you have like a lot of frameworks who which lets you do like bring up the browser, do clicks and automated testing like Selenium, Puppeteer, and Cypress. So there are so much things out there, and this is like one of the major contributors, that having tests gives you more courage to add in more features as well. So the next thing that I want to talk about is continuous integration and delivery. So now that you have your design and now you have your code and everything, it's very, very important that you are integrating this code as fast as possible, as small as possible, so that the user gets to use it and you get to have the feedback. So you have this build, measure and learn cycle, which is very important. So if you do big releases, it is also then becoming difficult to kind of like understand also, it's difficult to understand as well, that where is the bug, or basically like what is breaking your system. If you have like release cycles in smaller ways, and you are like deploying also in smaller cycles, then you can easily roll them back as well when there is something that is going wrong. I was in a team, we were like super radical, that every single commit that we do was immediately deployed to production, not in one regions, but in 4 geographical regions. So this is possible when you have also like all sorts of testing that gives you the courage to basically do this. So you can also use like Git, SVN. We mainly use trunk-based development, but you can also have something like Git flow and so on. So that could also help you basically develop, like whatever helps you to be able to continuously integrate and deliver. Also when I talk about like delivery, so it's very important to also have like a platform where you could deploy your software to, and that someone is taking care of the platform. So normally doing something in a DevOps mode is basically a culture change, but it's a change that's inevitable, because traditionally how it used to be is basically that there is developers who would write some code, throw it over the wall, and the operations people had the responsibility to run the code. So these are two like kind of like different roles which expect two different things. For an engineer, it's really important that like for the product team, it's important to build new features and everything, but the operations people want as less change as possible, which means that that you need to have a reliable software, right? Like which is stable. If you don't have a stable software, there is no point in adding features to your software, right? So this is really, really like important. So one of the main practices that helps us to bring these two together is the site reliability engineering practices. Basically, this is a role where like there is more knowledge on the operations part of the product. So these two roles come together in one team, and and basically like helping also the engineers to build stable and reliable software. So what is the SRE practices are talking about is basically like deployment, configuration, and monitoring of the products, because this is also the main way of how you can understand your product better. And if the, like I said, if the product is not reliable, there is no point in adding more features to it. So there will, many of the times we always have like these questions in our mind, right? Like, do I add features or do I concentrate on reliability? So there would be some release and your software is broken, and but you also want this new great feature which would bring a lot of business value, but how do you focus on, how do you prioritize on whether feature or reliability? That's when error budgets come in. So error budgets are kind of like money that you have with you, and if you have an outage, then you take your error budget goes down, which means basically that you have to concentrate on reliability to get basically the budget back. So let's talk about availability, right? We have heard this jargons like 99, there is no such thing as 100% availability. It's like 99.9% availability if you want to achieve that, right? So basically what do you need to, what it means to have 99.99% availability is that you can have a downtime of 2 minutes per week, or 4 minutes monthly, or in a year 53 minutes. So just 4 minutes downtime is basically is nothing, right? Like if you have an outage, and to basically to understand it and to fix it, and this itself could take more than 4 minutes. So if you want to achieve this level of availability, you have to put in a lot of efforts. That's why when you have focus on the product, reliability is also one of the most important product feature. Yeah, so basically the last thing that I want to talk about is blameless postmortem. So at the end, if there is an outage or anything, like it's very, very important also to basically go over it and learn from the mistakes, and to make sure that, you know, you are not doing the mistakes, you're learning from the failures, and then you're putting your efforts so that it doesn't happen again. It's very important to be humble and to be kind in these meetings, not to pass blame around, and also to transparently communicate to all of the stakeholders who are interested in what happened and what will be your next steps. So finally, I want to just say that basically we have 6 live products and 200 plus microservices and 99.9% availability. And just wanted to show this picture of our team. So we had an outage. The response time was 34 milliseconds, which was causing the entire product to choke. And we all worked together. I think it was like a week before Christmas and everything. And all the teams stayed together. People were taking support calls, and the product manager was answering the stakeholder. Everyone was there supporting. And finally, we were able to bring down to 2 milliseconds. So at the end, what I want to say is that it's really, really important to have a great culture and a good team morale and great principles, and you can fit in all the practices in place. And this is really what is most important for a sustainable product. Thank you so much. Uh, can you hear me? Cool. Okay, I have a question. You do planning every week. How do you decide who is going to work on what? Do you keep the same pairs for the whole project, or do you rotate? basically in the planning meeting, we do not decide who works on what. So whichever pair is picking the story from the backlog can just like, the pair is just starting the story from the backlog, and we do, so it's very important that you are rotating between pairs. So every day we have a small stand-up just to figure out who is pairing with who, and the pair basically decides yeah, the pair basically decides like which story to pick. That's about it. So in the planning meeting, we are not saying who is going to work on what. There is one more question: how would manual QA play into this model? So basically we have thank you so much for the question, Erinda. So the next question is, how would manual QA play into this model? So basically in the current model that we have as a team, we do not have manual QA, so we try to automate all the tests, but we do have like business units that are using our products, and they do have so for example, some of the business unit, they will have the manual QA, and then they are like going over. So for example, lots of sometimes we get like, you know, on accessibility and so on, like we do like get some insights on like how we can improve this constantly as well through the manual QA. So we have this outside of the team through the business unit. So this is how I can see that it plays into the model. um, did I miss something? Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, so I'm also available in chat and everything, like, so if you would like to know a bit more about this, please do reach out to me. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity for presenting it on this day. Thank you so much.